Welcome to another episode of Kungfu Explained. This is the third episode in our Shaolin Legacy series, which focuses on the Shaolin Temple and its history. In the last episode, we covered the Sui dynasty and the formation of the Tang dynasty, and we went into the facts related to the commonly spread story of the 13 Shaolin monks and their support of the early Tang emperor, Li Shimin. While the story was the basis for the plot of the Jet Li movie, The Shaolin Temple, the film unfortunately did not present the historical reality, as we showed in our last episode. Now we will continue to move forward in the Shaolin Temple's timeline, from the Tang dynasty and onwards. Following Li Shimin being crowned as Emperor Taizong of the Tang, he passed various decrees pertaining to religious institutions. During his rule, peace and unification became a reality, and people were not living in an age of constant warfare and chaos. Due to this, agricultural production boomed, the population grew, new cities were built, and trade flourished, both domestic and foreign. Improved communication with outside civilizations led to numerous merchants from Central Asia coming into China. In this environment, Buddhism flourished due to the closer contact with India and Central Asia. During this time, many Chinese monks traveled to Buddhism's place of origin to collect sacred texts and study, and they brought this knowledge back to China when they returned. Along with Buddhism's rapid development during this time, the Shaolin monastery received imperial patronage and thrived. Over the following decades, Shaolin became a key center for Buddhist study. From the mid-7th century, the Chan sect of Buddhism had developed into two branches, namely the northern school, headed by Shi Shenxiu, and the southern school, headed by Shi Huineng. The northern school continued to base its teachings on the Lankavatara Sutra, which espouses the concept that the mind of an enlightened person is as clear as a mirror, and that this mirror requires constant and gradual dusting to keep clear. Within this school, it is believed that the cultivation of the mind is a long and difficult process that requires laborious physical and mental exertion along with discipline and restraint. We can see here the overlapping concepts with that of martial arts or Kungfu development, which also requires long-term physical and mental exertion along with discipline to develop. There are no shortcuts or magic in the development of martial arts and skill. The southern branch of Chan Buddhism, under Shi Huineng, based its teachings on the Diamond Sutra and the idea of directly pointing to the heart-mind. It postulated the concept that all human beings had an innate Buddha nature, and that a person could become instantly enlightened without long processes and struggle. It did away with complex scripture, intense meditation, and ascetic practices. In essence, it lowered the proverbial bar for Chan practice, thereby opening it up to a wider audience, particularly the illiterate masses. Incidentally, the current oldest surviving printed book on earth is a copy of the Diamond Sutra, written in Chinese and printed in the year 868 A.D. The Southern School integrated Buddhist doctrine with that of both Taoism and Confucianism to create a truly Chinese form of Chan. Based on his teachings, Shi Huineng's disciples compiled the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, which became a key text for Chan Buddhism and has been studied for centuries. By the late 7th century, Shaolin enjoyed a period of great fame. Emperor Gaozong was on the throne during this period. He was the youngest son of Li Shimin, and his second wife was Empress Wu, who was in fact Wu Zetian. Wu Zetian was previously one of Li Shimin's concubines, and following his death, she married his 9th son and successor, Gaozong, and became his primary consort in 655. In the year 660, Gaozong suffered from a serious stroke, which basically left him debilitated and unable to fully function. Through this, Empress Wu Zetian was the de facto ruler of China, and she was the true power behind the throne, issuing decrees and ordering action within the Tang court. She held the imperial seal, and Emperor Gaozong conferred with her on all matters. Wu Zetian wielded powers and privileges that no other empress had before her, or even after. She oversaw both political and military actions of the Tang Empire. Under Wu Zetian, the Tang Empire expanded into Central Asia and also enacted military campaigns in the Korean peninsula. Within China, she was also responsible for the government's support of Buddhism, Taoism, and literature in general. The Shaolin Temple received the patronage of Wu Zetian, and she visited the monastery with Emperor Gaozong in the year 672, and provided donations to it numerous times. At later stages, she even funded renovations that were conducted at the temple, and moved statues from the temple to the imperial capital for worship. Due to Shaolin Temple's close proximity to the empire's eastern capital of Luoyang, it was frequently visited by leading politicians, poets, and scholars. So this period was truly a high point for the Shaolin Temple and its influence on both Buddhism and society as a whole. To highlight the prominent position that the Shaolin Temple held within China's Buddhist environment at the time is the fact that the famed Buddhist monk Xuanzang requested to join the Shaolin Temple in 645 and again in 657. Xuanzang was and is a very important figure within Chinese Buddhism. He traveled to India, beginning this journey in 628, and followed the Silk Road through Xinjiang, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and Kashmir. He finally reached India in the year 631. Xuanzang stayed in India for more than a decade, learning from various teachers as he traveled throughout the country and collected hundreds of scriptures and texts on Buddhism. He decided to return to China in 643 and finally arrived in Chang'an in 645. He brought with him statues, relics, and over 600 Mahayana and Hinayana texts. Upon his return, he was received by Emperor Taizong and was offered a high-ranking official post, which he refused, and requested to stay at the Shaolin Temple to study and translate texts. This was denied by the emperor, and he was ordered to establish a translation academy at another monastery. Xuanzang contributed greatly to the development of Buddhism in China. In 646, he finished the compilation of the Great Tang Records of the Western Regions, or Da Tang Xi Yu Ji, and went on to translate other prominent texts such as the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra, or the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, as well as many others. Xuanzang was later offered positions within the Tang government, once again by Emperor Gaozong, which he refused, and once again requested to join the Shaolin Temple. This clearly shows the important and prominent position that the Shaolin Temple held in the realm of Buddhism in China. Xuanzang has had a profound and important impact on Buddhism in East Asia. More than that, his compiled Great Tang Records of the Western Regions, which documents what he witnessed during his travels along the Silk Road to India, is the largest and most detailed account of those countries to have been compiled by a Buddhist pilgrim. It recorded both the political and social situation of these countries in Central and Southern Asia at the time in detail that had not been available before. It remains today of great value to both historians and archaeologists alike. Interestingly, Xuanzang's travels are partially credited with the spreading of sugar-making technology in both medieval China and India. If you have ever had the pleasure of eating Diwali sweets, then you can thank Xuanzang partially for that. Interestingly, Xuanzang's journey spawned numerous related tales over time, some being fantastical fictional accounts. Within China today exist its 4 great classic novels, which include Romance of the Three Kingdoms, or 三国演义, The Water Margin, or 水浒传, Journey to the West, or 西游记, and Dream of the Red Chamber, or 红楼梦. These 4 works have been highly influential in Chinese literary history and society as a whole. Journey to the West, or 西游记, was written in the 16th century during the Ming dynasty and is generally attributed to Wu Zong. Written approximately 9 centuries after it occurred, this tale is based on Xuanzang's account contained within his Great Tang records of the western regions, and his journey to India, with added folk mythology and fiction by the Ming dynasty author. In it, the main character is a monk named Tang Xuanzang, who is based on Xuanzang, and he is accompanied by 3 others on his journey. One of them is everyone's favorite simian, Sun Wukong, who is also known as the Monkey King. Sun Wukong has become one of the most popular warriors in Chinese culture, and he is connected directly to Buddhism. This position was cemented through the novel Journey to the West, in which Sun Wukong is not merely a companion to Xuanzang's character, Tang Xuanzang, but in fact his protector. The group is attacked numerous times by all sorts of magical beasts, and it is Sun Wukong wielding a magical staff or cudgel that protects them. This staff can change size as is desired, from being as tiny as a needle to reaching high into the heavens. Likewise, Sun Wukong himself can also magically change his own size and dimensions as he desires. Here we can see an overlap with the guardian deity of the Shaolin Temple, namely Vajrapani, who is also known as Kimnara. According to the Shaolin tale, he emerged from the temple stove as a giant standing astride the peaks of Mount Sung. Within Shaolin lore, Vajrapani, who is venerated and worshipped at the temple, does indeed wield a staff, and there is a mythical tale that the Shaolin monk, Seng Cho, attained his skill with the staff after praying to Vajrapani. The staff as a weapon is a key core component of the Shaolin Temple. We will cover Vajrapani and this aspect more in depth in a future episode. There is still much speculation as to whether it was the journey to the west and tales of Sun Wukong that influenced the Shaolin Temple and its staff myths, or if it was the other way around. As far as scholars are concerned, they have found that literature mentioning Sun Wukong wielding a staff exists from the 13th century, while tales of Vajrapani wielding this weapon are only traceable to the 16th century. So it is most likely that pre-existing popular culture and literature actually influenced the creation of the image of the Shaolin Temple as being a militant temple with staff-wielding monks. What is interesting, however, is the fact that indeed a true tale connected to both Buddhism and the Shaolin Temple in the form of Xuanzang's journey, and his written account thereof, was in fact the basis for the creation of the Journey to the West novel, and the character of Sun Wukong, which seems to have then re-influenced the Shaolin Temple lore thereafter. It's a case of art imitating life, and then life imitating art again. The Journey to the West tale has had a tremendous influence on both Chinese and Japanese culture, and the Monkey King is a key character in classical Chinese opera as well. The character of Sun Wukong was the basis for many offshoots, such as Dragon Ball Z, whose main character is Son Goku, which is the Japanese pronunciation of the Monkey King's name. The character of Sun Wukong still continues to be immensely popular today. Ironically, the fictional tale and character of the Monkey King has even influenced the development of performance styles of Chinese martial arts, which have been promoted in recent history by the Shaolin Temple itself. Within the plethora of the Shaolin Temple's modern Kungfu styles, the monkey staff is regularly promoted and demonstrated. It is often touted, along with much of the other content performed by its demonstrating monks, as being a traditional form of Shaolin martial arts. While it is entertaining to watch, it clearly is compiled for spectator value and not martial efficacy, and draws on the Monkey King's performances within Chinese opera, as well as the tale of Journey to the West. Its inclusion, like much of the other content contained within the Shaolin performances, is a recent creation and addition. But it is, through a strange twist of fate, connected to Xuanzang's true journey. By the early 8th century, the Shaolin Temple was recognized as a leading center for Chan studies, and this was cemented with the return of Chan's sixth patriarch, Fa Ru. Fa Ru was recognized as the recipient of the Dharma transmission from Hongren. His return to the Shaolin Temple began a revival of Chan at Shaolin, following Hui Ke's departure roughly 100 years prior. This legitimized Shaolin's position as the cradle of Chan Buddhism, and with that, many Chan masters of the northern school came to reside at the temple. In fact, the temple accommodated Dharma masters from other sects of Buddhism as well. During the reign of Emperor Xuanzang, he bestowed upon the Shaolin Temple a caption for the famed Shaolin Monastery seal of 728 in his own calligraphy. His patronage was not due to his religious piety and support of the faith, but rather in recognition of the temple's assistance to Li Shimin 100 years prior. In fact, Emperor Xuanzang aimed to curtail much of the power of the Buddhist clergy, and he issued a ban on the construction of new temples. However, he exempted the Shaolin Temple from a land confiscation order that he effected on other temples. Here again, his support of the temple had nothing to do with Buddhism, but rather it was solely due to the military actions of the temple 100 years earlier. The Shaolin Monastery seal of 728 contains 7 texts inscribed on it, and these include a general history of the temple, Li Shimin's letter of appreciation, as well as several other Tang legal documents. The core theme of these texts is that of the Shaolin Temple's military activities 100 years prior, as well as what it was awarded as a result of this. We can deduce that the Shaolin Temple felt the need at this period in time, when Emperor Xuanzang was attacking numerous temples and monasteries and confiscating their land, to engrave this stele as a reminder to the current regime of their support of Li Shimin and the Tang. They also engraved their rights to properties that were granted to them previously by the Tang on this stele, to not only legitimize their ownership of such, but also as a form of legal safeguard from confiscation, which they were obviously concerned about. The construction of the 728 stele did indeed successfully achieve the goals it was erected for. It safeguarded the temple from numerous future misfortunes. During Xuanzang's reign, the northern and southern schools of Chan were in competition with one another, and to this end, the emperor organized a debate between these two schools, to be held in 734 in Luoyang. The southern school won the debate, and subsequently the influence of this branch began to gradually surpass that of the northern school. The Shaolin Temple, which had been a center for the northern branch of Chan, began to promote the southern branch. In 797, the monastery invited the southern branch master Shi Weiquan to teach there, a position he held for a number of years. Following his death, he was awarded a posthumous title by the Tang emperor. We can see that in general, both Buddhism and the Shaolin Temple were supported by the Tang emperors, who encouraged the growth and development of the faith along with Confucianism and Taoism. A great exception to this was Emperor Wu Zong, who was hostile towards Buddhism, as he was a keen follower of Taoism. Emperor Wu Zong saw Buddhism as a problem and a burden on society, particularly due to the fact that monasteries held too much land and wealth, and that they were exempt from taxation. He launched a campaign of persecution against Buddhism in the form of the Huichang persecution of Buddhism, which lasted from the year 844 to 845. Emperor Wuzong aimed to suppress and eliminate the Buddhist religious establishment completely. Through this campaign, he closed down more than 4,600 temples and dismissed over 260,000 monks and nuns. He confiscated land in the hundreds of millions of acres. He went on to persecute other faiths as well, including Islam, Zoroastrianism, and Nestorianism. At the same time, his imperial court promoted Taoism. It is of importance to note that during this purge, the Shaolin Temple was largely spared the brunt of the government's actions, and even had some government officials visit the temple at the time. Again, we can see clearly this had nothing to do with their support of Buddhism, but rather their support of the temple due to its actions when it assisted Li Shimin and the establishment of the Tang dynasty. The Huicheng persecution destroyed many differing schools of Buddhism that had existed in China prior to that time. The southern Chan school managed to survive, and the Shaolin Temple recovered after the persecution to continue to promote and develop Chan Buddhism. But Buddhism never regained its institutional strength it enjoyed prior to this purge. It is clear to see that the rise of Buddhism and its success was clearly hinged on the support of the imperial government, whereas its decline and destruction was also connected to the imperial government. This is a lesson that the Shaolin Temple learnt and understood very clearly, and this knowledge affected it into the future. That concludes this episode of Kungfu Explained and the third episode of the Shaolin Legacy series. In the next episode, we will continue our journey through the Song Dynasty and beyond. If you enjoyed this video, as well as my other endeavors, please do click, like, and subscribe. And if you are able, please support Mushin martial culture on Patreon. Patreon supporters have the ability to submit suggestions for upcoming episodes of Kungfu Explained that may be covered. So, until next time, everybody, keep training.